Have you ever felt your entire mood collapse just because of one careless comment, one silent glance, or one unexpected reaction from someone who probably wasn't even thinking about you in the first place? In this audiobook, we will explore how to stop taking things personally, how to protect your emotional energy, and how to build unshakable confidence that stays steady no matter what people say, do, or assume about you. Chapter 1. The Weight You Shouldn't Carry. There comes a moment in life when you realize that most of the pain you feel isn't coming from what people actually do to you, but from the meaning your mind attaches to every action, every word, and every tone. When you take things personally, you hand over your emotional power without even noticing it. You allow someone else's bad day, fast reply, or distant attitude to shape your inner world. This habit grows slowly, and once it settles inside you, everything starts feeling heavier than it needs to be. You begin overthinking every conversation. You replay every message. You reanalyze every expression until it becomes a story created by your fears, not by reality. And the more you do this, the more fragile your confidence becomes, because your worth becomes tied to the changing moods of people around you. But here is the truth your heart has been needing to hear. Most people are caught up in their own lives, their own struggles, their own insecurities, and their own storms. Their reactions are rarely about you. Their silence is rarely about you. Their mood is rarely about you. Yet your mind convinces you that everything is a reflection of your value. When you start seeing this clearly, something inside you begins to shift. You stop assuming. You stop absorbing. You stop taking emotional responsibility for things that were never yours to hold. This realization feels like a quiet sunrise inside your chest, a slow reminder that your inner peace deserves protection. To rebuild your confidence, you must first break the illusion that every action around you is a message directed at your heart. Confidence doesn't come from becoming louder, stronger, or more aggressive. True confidence grows from calm clarity, from understanding yourself enough that the noise around you no longer decides your worth. As you move through this chapter, allow yourself to release the weight you've been carrying for years. You don't need to read people's minds. You don't need to decode every pause. You don't need to search for hidden meanings in harmless moments. You only need to return to yourself. That is where your confidence begins, and that is where your healing starts. As you move deeper into this realization, you begin to understand that many moments in your life were never personal at all, and they only felt personal because your mind tried to fill every silent gap with its own fearful interpretations. You think back to times when a short reply unsettled you, not because the message carried anything hidden, but because your old insecurities immediately connected it to past experiences, and without noticing it, you accepted that emotional heaviness again and again. You also begin to see that most people are carrying their own weight inside them, their stress, their responsibilities, their worries, and their exhaustion, and most reactions you receive come from these pressures, not from any judgment about you. This understanding quietly settles into your awareness, and with it comes a noticeable shift in how you process things. You pause a little more, you observe yourself with more honesty, and you stop allowing every passing emotion to enter your heart without permission. In these small pauses, you discover a gentle strength growing within you, a strength that helps you separate your inner peace from the unpredictable moods of others, and this difference slowly gives you the space to respond instead of react. You start realizing how often you replayed conversations in your mind, searching for meaning in neutral moments. And the more you notice this habit, the more you see how much emotional energy you've been losing to thoughts that were never grounded in truth. This awareness becomes a quiet kind of protection for your confidence, because once you stop assuming that everything is about you, you stop shrinking yourself to please others, and you stop seeking reassurance from situations that were never meant to define your worth. With time, you find yourself responding with clarity rather than fear, and this clarity shows you that not every silence needs interpretation, not every expression needs analysis, and not every shift in someone's tone should be taken as a message directed toward you. Then one day, without planning it, you notice that someone's distant mood does not shake your sense of self, and another day you realize that a short reply no longer triggers old doubts. And in these moments, you see that genuine emotional growth is happening quietly inside you. And as this chapter comes to an end, you understand something important. Letting go of these unnecessary emotional burdens does not make you less caring. It makes you calmer, clearer, and more grounded, because true confidence begins when you stop carrying meanings that were never yours to carry. Chapter 2. Why People's Opinions Hit You So Deeply. As you move ahead in this journey, you slowly begin to understand that people's opinions affect you more than they should, because certain parts of you still feel unsure, and whenever someone's words touch those sensitive areas, your heart reacts faster and stronger than you expected. You notice that when someone comments about you, even in a simple or casual way, your mind instantly compares their words with the version of yourself you want to show the world. And when their view doesn't match the image you hold inside, you feel a sudden discomfort that makes you question your worth. This doesn't mean you are weak or overly sensitive. It simply shows that you have spent years relying on the approval of others to feel stable, and without realizing it, your heart learned to seek emotional safety from people instead of building that sense of comfort within yourself. As you think more clearly, you notice that the actual pain doesn't come from what someone says, but from the hidden fear behind it. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being judged unfairly, or the fear that maybe you are not as good as you hope to be in the eyes of others. You also begin to recognize that most people talk from their own stress, their own stories, their own struggles, and their own state of mind. And even though their words are shaped by their personal experiences, you still end up giving those words more weight than they deserve. With this awareness, you start noticing how easily a small comment can make you uneasy, how a normal disagreement can feel personal, and how simple feedback can affect you deeply. And this shows you how much power you have been giving to moments that should not decide your emotional state. But when you pause and observe honestly, you realize that the reason these opinions hurt is not because they are true, but because they land on places inside you that already feel uncertain, and your reaction becomes more about your own doubts than the intention behind their words. This clarity brings a gentle sense of relief, because it helps you see that many emotions you feel are not coming from the outside world at all. They rise from old beliefs, old fears, and old thoughts that you carried quietly without checking if they were ever real. As you look within, you begin to understand which opinions truly matter and which ones only disturb you because they awaken your insecurities, and this understanding gives you the strength to separate the voices that help you from the voices that only confuse you. And as this chapter unfolds, you begin to realize that the more you understand your own fears, the less control other people's opinions have over your emotions, and this shift marks the beginning of a deeper confidence that starts growing quietly from inside you. When you look more closely at this pattern, you notice that people's opinions affect you strongly because you expect others to always see you in a positive and gentle way, and whenever their reaction feels different from what you hoped, your mind quickly assumes something is wrong with you. You begin to see how this expectation quietly adds pressure inside you, because you keep trying to manage how people think and respond, and this habit makes every small opinion feel important, even when it doesn't deserve that kind of power. As you understand yourself better, it becomes clear that your heart reacts sharply because it wants to feel accepted, and when someone's words don't match your hope, you feel as if your efforts and intentions are suddenly being doubted. With time, you realize that many opinions hurt not because they are true, but because you want people to notice your sincerity and your goodness, and when they overlook these things, it touches the fear that maybe you aren't being seen the way you wish to be. You notice that you often give more value to a negative opinion than a positive one, and even when several people appreciate you, one person's criticism becomes stronger in your mind because your attention moves toward what feels threatening. As this understanding grows, you start observing how easily one small comment can change your mood, and how quickly your thoughts begin to defend or justify you, even when no explanation was needed in the first place. Slowly, you learn that opinions hurt less when you stop seeing them as a final judgment on who you are, and instead see them as viewpoints shaped by another person's history and mindset, not by a complete understanding of your character. You begin to understand that emotional stability doesn't come from making everyone like you. It comes from accepting that people see the world through their own lens, and their opinions reflect that lens more than they reflect your truth. As you practice this, you feel a small shift inside you. A comment that once felt heavy now feels lighter. A remark that once bothered you slowly loses its power, and you find yourself letting go of things that once held you tightly. You also notice that you don't need to argue with every opinion or correct every misunderstanding, because reacting to every voice only drains your peace, while choosing clarity and calmness protects your energy. And as this chapter comes to an end, you realize something important. The moment you stop giving every opinion a place in your heart, you gain control over your emotions again, and the less you depend on people's reactions, the more confident you feel from within. Chapter 3. How your mind creates stories that aren't true. As you go deeper into understanding yourself, you begin to notice how quickly your mind reacts to the smallest changes around you. It sees one moment, one expression, or one silence, and it immediately starts building explanations, even though you don't have the full truth yet. You realize your mind cannot sit comfortably with uncertainty. It wants answers fast. It searches for meaning even when nothing meaningful has happened, and because it wants to protect you, it often chooses the explanation that feels safest, which usually means the one that sounds negative. You start noticing how your thoughts jump from a simple situation to a complicated story. Someone becomes quiet, and your mind tells you they must be upset. Someone slows down their replies, and your mind assumes they lost interest. Someone sounds different, and your mind believes something is wrong. These conclusions feel powerful because they connect to fears you already carry. They touch the memories where you felt ignored or misunderstood. They remind you of times when silence meant pain. So your mind repeats the same pattern because it thinks it is keeping you safe from being hurt again. As you observe yourself more honestly, you begin to see that your emotional response does not come from what people actually did. It comes from the meaning your mind added. And once you understand this, you realize how many times you reacted to a thought instead of a fact. You notice how quickly the mind fills empty spaces. When you don't know the reason behind someone's behavior, your mind creates its own version. It doesn't wait for clarity. It doesn't pause for truth. It picks the possibility that fits your insecurity and makes it feel like reality. You begin to see how your mind mixes your past with your present. A small moment today feels heavier because it reminds you of something painful from yesterday. And even though the situation is different, the emotion feels the same because your mind used the old wound to explain the new moment. This awareness helps you slow down. It teaches you to not trust the first explanation your mind creates. It reminds you that the first thought is often fear speaking, not reality. And when you pause long enough to question it, the whole story starts losing its strength. You realize your mind is trying to help you even when it feels like it's hurting you. It wants to prepare you so you don't get disappointed. It wants to protect you so you don't get surprised. But sometimes that protection becomes pressure, and it turns simple moments into heavy emotions. As this part of the journey settles inside you, something becomes clear. Peace comes not from controlling situations, but from controlling the stories your mind creates about them. And when you guide your thoughts with awareness instead of fear, life becomes lighter, calmer, and far more honest than the stories you once believed. As you look deeper into this pattern, you notice how quickly your mind turns uncertainty into a complete narrative. It sees one missing detail and starts filling the gap with assumptions, trying to create control even in moments where nothing needs fixing. It's a habit shaped by old fear of the unknown. You realize your mind doesn't enjoy waiting for clarity. It rushes toward explanations that feel familiar, even if those explanations are not connected to the truth. And familiar usually means the same old insecurity, the same worry, and the same doubt you've carried for years. You see how your thoughts often choose the darker possibility first. Not because you're negative, but because your mind believes preparing for the worst will protect you from getting hurt. It doesn't understand that preparing for pain makes you feel pain long before anything even happens. You begin noticing how a single moment can trigger a whole chain of imagined conclusions. Someone becomes quiet for a while, and your mind builds a story around it. Someone replies differently, and your mind assumes they're unhappy. Someone's energy changes, and your mind decides it must be your fault. None of this is confirmed, yet it feels heavy. As you understand yourself more, you see how these imagined stories impact your emotions. You feel stressed about situations that don't exist. You lose confidence over misunderstandings. You create pressure inside yourself simply because your mind needed a quick explanation to feel safe. You also notice how your mind pulls from old memories to explain new moments. It remembers past hurt faster than your progress. It brings old fears forward and uses them like evidence, even when the current moment is completely different from the past. This growing awareness helps you step into a new kind of control. Not the control of predicting everything, but the control of questioning your own thoughts. You begin asking, is this true? Do I know for sure? Is this fear or fact? And with these small questions, the story your mind created starts to lose its strength. You see how much peace you gain when you don't accept the first thought that appears. You give people time. You give yourself space. You allow situations to unfold before deciding what they mean. And this shift removes emotional weight you've carried for far too long. With practice, your reactions become calmer. You stop panicking at the first sign of change. You stop assuming the worst every time something feels different. You begin to understand that not every silence needs interpretation, and not every pause carries a hidden message. And as this chapter settles inside you, something becomes clear. Peace doesn't come from stopping your thoughts completely. It comes from knowing which thoughts to believe. And when you choose clarity over assumption, your inner world becomes steady, gentle, and far more honest than the stories your mind once created. Chapter 4. How you train your mind to stay calm. As you enter this chapter, you begin noticing that calmness doesn't appear by luck. It grows from the small choices you make every day. And the first choice is learning to pause before reacting, because that pause gives your mind a moment to see things clearly instead of through fear. You realize your mind follows whatever direction you repeat the most. If you repeat worry, it becomes normal. If you repeat assumptions, they become automatic. And if you repeat calm responses, your mind eventually learns that not every situation deserves panic. You start seeing that your mind listens to the way you interpret things. When you tell yourself, maybe something is wrong, your body reacts as if danger is real. But when you say, let's wait and understand, your thoughts settle and the pressure inside you softens. You notice how much peace you gain when you stop rushing toward conclusions. A slow breath helps your mind reset. A moment of silence gives you space to think, and even a simple reminder that you don't know the full truth yet prevents your emotions from taking over. You begin understanding that calmness isn't about ignoring your feelings. It's about guiding them. It's about reminding your mind that not every moment is urgent, not every change is a threat, and not every silence needs to be analyzed. Over time, your mind learns to react less. As you practice these small habits, you see their power. You respond with clarity. You give people time. You stop adding pressure where it doesn't belong. These gentle adjustments build a stable foundation inside you, one that keeps your emotions steady even when situations shift. You also notice that calmness grows when you choose what you allow into your mind. When you stop feeding fear with imagined stories, fear weakens. When you stop analyzing every detail, your focus returns to reality. And when you stop trying to read people's minds, your emotional balance strengthens. You guide your thoughts by asking simple questions. Is this real? Am I assuming? Can I give this more space? Each question slows your mind down. Each one helps you step back from unnecessary stress. And every time you do this, your inner stability grows. As this clarity expands, you realize calmness isn't something you force. It appears when you stop empowering thoughts that aren't true. It appears when you choose truth over imagination. And it appears when you stop turning simple moments into emotional storms. And as this part comes to a close, you understand something meaningful. A calm mind isn't a mind without thoughts. It's a mind that knows which thoughts deserve attention. And when you start training your mind this way, your reactions soften, your emotions settle, and life begins to feel lighter from the inside. As you continue building this calmer version of yourself, you start noticing how powerful consistency truly is. Your mind doesn't change in one day. It changes through repeated moments where you choose ease instead of urgency and truth instead of fear. These small choices slowly reshape the way your thoughts move. You realize that calmness grows when you stop letting every situation demand a reaction from you. Not everything needs your energy. Not every moment needs your explanation. And not every feeling deserves a decision. Once you understand this, emotional control becomes easier. You begin to see that your mind becomes calmer when you stop feeding it with unnecessary pressure. You don't have to respond instantly. You don't have to solve everything right away. You don't have to meet every expectation. Your mind relaxes when it knows that silence, space, and patience are allowed. You notice how grounding it feels when you return to your breath during tense moments. A slow inhale gives your thoughts room to slow down. A gentle exhale releases the weight you are carrying. And this simple habit signals your mind that nothing needs to be rushed. As you practice this calm approach, you start understanding that emotional stability comes from staying present. When you stay in the moment, you stop imagining things that haven't happened. You stop creating fear that isn't real. And you stop letting past memories control today's reactions. You realize that being calm does not mean you avoid difficult situations. It means you handle them without letting your thoughts explode into unnecessary stories. You process them step by step. You respond with balance. You face the moment with a quieter mind. You also begin noticing that calmness grows when you give yourself permission to not know everything. You accept that some answers come with time, some situations need patience, and some people need space. This acceptance reduces the pressure you once put on yourself. As this understanding deepens, you see that your mind becomes more peaceful when you stop trying to control things that are out of your hands. You learn to focus on what you can manage, your thoughts, your reactions, and your attitude. And the moment you shift your focus, peace naturally follows. You discover that letting go is a skill, letting go of overthinking, letting go of assumptions, letting go of conclusions that never had proof. As you practice this, situations feel lighter, conversations feel easier, and your emotional world becomes much more stable. And as this chapter nears its end, you begin to understand something powerful. A calm mind is built through choices you make every single day. Choices to pause, choices to breathe, choices to not overreact, and choices to focus on what's real instead of what's imagined. With every choice, you train your mind to stay balanced, steady, and peaceful inside. Chapter 5. How to stop taking emotional responsibility for others. As you enter this chapter, you begin noticing how often you carry emotions that were never yours. You feel responsible for how others think, how they react, and how they feel, as if their mood is something you must manage. And with time, you realize this habit quietly drains your peace more than anything else. You see how quickly you blame yourself when someone becomes quiet. Their silence feels like your fault. Their stress feels like something you caused. Their distance feels like your mistake. But when you look closer, you understand most people are simply dealing with their own thoughts and struggles. You realize you've spent years trying to keep everyone around you comfortable. You tried avoiding their disappointment. You tried preventing their anger. You tried adjusting yourself so no one felt upset. And without noticing it, you started taking emotional responsibility for moments that were never yours. As this truth settles inside you, you see how heavy this burden really is. You can support someone, but you cannot carry their entire emotional world. You can be present, but you cannot become the solution to someone's inner battles. You begin understanding that people act from their own fears, memories, and pressures. Sometimes they're quiet because they're overwhelmed. Sometimes they're distant because they're tired. Sometimes they're stressed because of something you know nothing about. And none of this means you did something wrong. You notice how your mind jumps to self-blame because it wants control. It thinks that if you hold responsibility for everything, nothing will fall apart. But this habit only creates more stress and makes you feel responsible for emotions that were never connected to you. You start practicing a healthier distance. You remind yourself that someone else's mood does not define your worth. Their tone is not a judgment on your character. Their reaction is not a reflection of your value. This separation brings a quiet sense of relief inside you. You slowly give people the space to handle their feelings on their own. You stop rushing to fix every moment. You stop apologizing for things you didn't do. You allow the situation to breathe, and you allow yourself to step back without guilt or pressure. With time, you feel emotional weight lifting off your shoulders. You no longer feel responsible for every shift in the room. You don't panic when someone acts differently. You don't absorb emotions that aren't yours to carry. And your mind feels lighter because you are no longer trying to control what lies outside your reach. And as this part comes to an end, you understand something powerful. Peace grows when you stop holding emotions that never belong to you. Peace stays when you let people manage their own feelings. And peace becomes natural when you finally learn that supporting others doesn't require sacrificing yourself. As you move deeper into this chapter, you begin noticing how much lighter life feels when you stop assuming every emotional shift around you needs your involvement. You start realizing that people have their own inner storms, and not every cloud in their sky is a sign for you to take action. Their mood belongs to them, not you. You see how often you used to rush toward fixing things the moment someone's tone changed. You tried easing their discomfort before even knowing what they were experiencing. And slowly you understand that this urgency didn't come from kindness alone. It came from fear. Fear of blame, fear of being misunderstood, and fear of disappointing someone. You begin accepting that you can care without carrying the full emotional weight. You can listen without absorbing. You can support without losing balance. And you can be present without turning into the solver of every feeling happening around you. You notice how freeing it becomes when you stop personalizing every reaction. Someone's silence doesn't mean you failed. Someone's stress doesn't mean you caused it. Someone's bad day doesn't mean you need to fix it. This separation helps you create boundaries that protect your peace while keeping your heart open. As you look closer, you understand that people need space to handle their emotions. If you keep absorbing everything, they never learn to process what's happening inside them. Your habit of carrying their feelings takes away their opportunity to grow. Stepping back isn't distance, it's respect. You also see that creating boundaries doesn't weaken your relationships, it strengthens them. Because now you show up with clarity instead of pressure, with honesty instead of fear, and with genuine presence instead of the heavy responsibility that once exhausted you from the inside. You begin using simple reminders whenever you feel yourself slipping into old patterns. You tell yourself, this feeling is theirs. You remind yourself, I can support, but I don't need to carry this. These short sentences keep you grounded and prevent your mind from taking unnecessary blame. As this clarity grows, you learn to focus on what you can control, your reactions, your peace, and your emotional balance. You stop trying to predict everyone's mood, and you stop reshaping yourself just to keep everyone comfortable. With time, you start feeling the change deeply. You wake up lighter, you speak more freely, you breathe without that tightness in your chest. And you realize that emotional freedom didn't come from people behaving differently. It came from you choosing not to carry what was never yours. And as this chapter closes, you understand something powerful. You were never responsible for everyone's emotional world. You were meant to support with calmness, not sacrifice. And when you stop taking responsibility for feelings that don't belong to you, your heart finally regains its natural strength. Chapter 6. How to Stop Over-Attaching to People's Behavior. As you step into this chapter, you begin noticing how easily your emotions attach themselves to the smallest changes in people. One warm reply lifts your mood, one late message brings it down. And slowly you realize you've allowed other people's behavior to influence how stable you feel inside. You see how this attachment forms quietly. You look for reassurance in their tone. You depend on their attention to feel secure, and when their pattern shifts even slightly, your mind starts searching for meaning, even when nothing meaningful has actually happened. You notice how a normal human moment, someone being tired, distracted, or busy, starts feeling personal. Because your heart is sensitive, you take their silence as a sign, even when it isn't about you. And this turns simple situations into emotional pressure. As you observe honestly, you understand that attachment grows when you let someone else's behavior become your emotional guide. Their silence lowers your confidence. Their mood affects your peace. Their reactions decide your stability. And over time, this turns into emotional dependence. You start seeing that this attachment doesn't come from love alone. It comes from fear. Fear of losing someone, fear of not being important, fear of being replaced. And the stronger the fear, the quicker your emotions react to harmless moments. You begin noticing how fast your thoughts create meaning. A short answer becomes a warning. A delayed reply becomes doubt. A different tone becomes distance. Your mind treats these small things as proof, even when nothing is confirmed. As this awareness grows, you step back and remind yourself that people live inside their own worlds. They carry their own stress, their own thoughts, and their own responsibilities. Their behavior reflects what's happening inside them, not your worth. You learn to give people space. You allow them to be quiet without assuming negativity. You allow them time without feeling rejected. You allow them to have off days without blaming yourself. And this small shift begins to loosen the attachment gently. You also realize your worth cannot depend on how consistently someone shows up. Confidence grows from within, stability grows from clarity, and emotional balance grows when you stop letting external behavior control your inner peace. As you practice this, you choose responses instead of reactions. You breathe before assuming. You think before absorbing. You pause before creating stories. And each pause reminds you that your emotions belong to you, not to someone else's temporary mood. And by the end of this part, something becomes clear. Detaching from people's behavior doesn't make you cold. It makes you steady. It frees you from emotional swings that were never yours. And it helps you connect with people with balance instead of fear. As you continue exploring this pattern, you begin noticing how often your emotions shift because of the smallest signals from others. A slight change in tone lowers your confidence, a delayed reply creates worry, and a small difference in their behavior suddenly feels like a threat to your connection, even when nothing serious is happening. You realize this sensitivity comes from expecting people to always behave in a steady, predictable way. When they don't, your mind rushes to fill the gap with assumptions. And those assumptions usually lean toward fear, not truth, because fear feels louder and more urgent inside you. You notice how easily you attach meaning to moments that were never meant to carry meaning. Someone replying late becomes a sign of losing interest. Someone being quiet becomes a sign of distance. Someone being distracted becomes a sign of disappointment. Your heart takes these moments personally even when they aren't about you. As you watch yourself honestly, you see how draining it is to let your emotional stability depend on someone else's temporary mood. People change with their day, their energy, and their stress. And none of that is a reflection of your worth. You start understanding that over-attachment grows when you rely too much on someone's behavior to feel secure. You wait for their messages to feel valued. You wait for their attention to feel balanced. And this slowly shifts your emotional power away from you and toward them. As this awareness develops, you begin reminding yourself that people's behavior is often shaped by things they never mention. They might be tired, overwhelmed, or distracted. They may need space. They may be dealing with something personal, and none of this means they are pulling away from you. You learn to pause before reacting. You give yourself a moment of breath, and in that small pause, you often realize your fear came from imagination, not from anything real. This pause becomes your first step toward emotional stability. You also start practicing small forms of emotional independence. You stop checking your phone again and again. You stop reading hidden meanings into normal messages. You stop measuring your worth through someone's availability. And with these steps, your confidence begins growing quietly from within. You give yourself the reassurance you once expected from others. You tell yourself, their mood is theirs. You remind yourself, I don't need constant signals to feel secure. And you say, I am enough even when someone is distant. These small lines calm the fear that once controlled your reactions. And as this part closes, something becomes clear. Detachment is not losing connection. It is losing fear. It is the ability to stay steady even when someone else has an off moment. It is choosing truth over assumptions. And with every step you take, your emotional world becomes stronger, clearer, and far more peaceful than before. Chapter 7. How self-worth protects you from emotional reactions. As you step into this chapter, you begin noticing something powerful. The more secure you feel within yourself, the less you react to the emotional shifts happening around you. Moments that once shook you start losing their effect, because self-worth creates a quiet shield that protects your peace. You realize many of your old reactions came from doubting your own value. A small comment felt like judgment. A short answer felt like rejection. A slight change in someone's behavior made you question yourself. And when your worth depended on others, Every moment felt personal. As you observe yourself now, everything feels different. Someone's silence doesn't frighten you. Someone's mood doesn't weaken your confidence. Someone's reaction doesn't define who you are. You no longer link your value to how consistently people show up. You begin seeing how self-worth brings emotional clarity. You stop assuming the worst. You stop attaching meaning to harmless moments. You stop interpreting every shift as a reflection of your worth. And your mind slowly escapes the cycle of overthinking. You also realize how self-worth changes the way you communicate. You speak calmly instead of defensively. You listen without feeling attacked. You share your feelings without fearing judgment. And you no longer carry pressure to appear perfect just to feel accepted. As this awareness grows, many triggers lose their power simply because you no longer search for validation in every interaction. You understand that people's reactions belong to them. Their mood belongs to them. Their opinion belongs to them. And none of it decides your value. You begin appreciating the difference between wanting connection and depending on it for emotional stability. When your worth is strong, you enjoy relationships without letting them control your inner state. You connect from confidence, not fear. And your relationships become healthier. You also start giving yourself the respect you once waited for from others. You acknowledge your growth. You recognize your effort. You value your kindness. And you remind yourself that your worth is steady, not something people can give or take away. As this clarity settles, you understand that emotional strength isn't about avoiding difficult moments. It's about knowing who you are when those moments arrive. Self-worth keeps you grounded. It keeps your reactions calm, and it stops your mind from creating stories that hurt you. And as this part closes, one truth becomes clear. When your self-worth is stable, your emotions become stable. When you know your value, you stop searching for signs in every interaction. And when you trust your own strength, the world stops feeling like something you must protect yourself from. As you continue strengthening your sense of worth, you begin noticing how your relationship with your own emotions starts changing. The things that once felt heavy now feel manageable. The behaviors that once made you doubt yourself lose their influence. And slowly, you realize that when your worth is steady, your reactions become steady too. You start seeing how much emotional noise disappears when you stop chasing approval from every direction. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer search for hidden meaning in simple conversations. And you no longer let someone's mood decide how you feel about yourself. Your worth becomes the anchor that keeps you grounded. You realize that self-worth gives you the confidence to let people have their own feelings without assuming those feelings reflect your value. Someone can be distant and still care. Someone can be stressed and still appreciate you. Someone can be quiet without judging you. This understanding protects your heart from unnecessary fear. As you observe your reactions, you notice how calm you feel when you trust yourself. You don't panic over a delayed message. You don't overthink a short reply. You don't crumble when someone doesn't respond the way you expected. You respond with clarity because your worth isn't up for debate anymore. You begin recognizing that your emotional stability grows when you no longer treat every moment as feedback about who you are. You understand that people's behavior reflects their world, not yours. And when you stop absorbing their emotions, your mind finally has space to rest. You also discover that self-worth changes the way you handle uncertainty. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't assume the worst. You give situations time to unfold. And this patience creates a sense of safety inside you that fear can no longer shake. As this awareness deepens, you learn to speak to yourself with more kindness. You remind yourself that one moment does not define you, one reaction does not measure you, and one misunderstanding does not reduce your value. You begin treating yourself with the same care you often offer others. You notice how your relationships improve when your worth is not attached to them. You show up with confidence instead of insecurity. You listen without fear. You communicate without trying to prove yourself. And people feel safer around you because you are no longer reacting from a place of emotional need. You also begin choosing your boundaries more clearly. You stop allowing behavior that drains your energy. You stop accepting treatment that makes you shrink. And each small act of self-respect strengthens the foundation you are building. And as this part comes to a close, one truth becomes clear. When your self-worth grows, your emotional world becomes quieter. Reactions soften, fears fade, and you finally begin living from a place where your identity isn't shaped by people, but by the strength you've built within yourself. Chapter 8. How to stay emotionally strong when people disappoint you. As you enter this chapter, you start noticing how often disappointment comes from expecting people to show the same level of care or consistency that you offer. You give with sincerity. You communicate with honesty. And when others don't match that effort, the gap quietly hurts you more than you admit. You realize disappointment isn't created by the action alone. It's created by the space between what you hoped for and what actually happened. You expected support and got silence. You hoped for understanding and received distance, and that difference shakes your emotional balance. As you look deeper, you understand that not everyone carries the same emotional awareness. Some people care but don't express it well. Some want connection but lack consistency. Some mean well but aren't present. Their limitation feels personal, even though it rarely has anything to do with your worth. You notice disappointment growing when you make someone the center of your emotional state. Their replies decide your mood. Their effort decides your comfort. Their reactions decide your confidence. And when they fail to meet your unspoken expectations, your whole energy drops. As this truth settles, you understand emotional strength doesn't come from avoiding disappointment. It comes from not collapsing when it arrives. It comes from knowing someone's inconsistency cannot interrupt the foundation you're building within yourself. You slowly accept that people disappoint because they are human, not because you lack value, not because you did something wrong. People simply carry their own limits, distractions, and emotional capacity, and sometimes they fall short even when they don't want to. You begin noticing a shift when you stop treating disappointment like a personal attack. You treat it as information, as clarity, as a sign that someone may not be able to meet you at the level you meet them. And this understanding protects your heart from unnecessary emotional storms. You learn to adjust expectations without lowering your standards. You stay kind, but stop overgiving. You stay open, but stop assuming people will always match your consistency. You stay genuine, but no longer let someone's inconsistency make you doubt yourself. As this awareness grows, you respond to disappointment with calm instead of shock. You allow yourself to feel the hurt, but you don't let it consume you. You breathe before reacting. You choose understanding before assumption. And you return to yourself instead of chasing explanations that won't change anything. And as this part closes, one truth becomes clear. Emotional strength isn't about expecting perfection. It's about staying steady when others fall short. It's about holding your worth when someone else drops their responsibility. And it's remembering that disappointment may touch your heart, but it cannot break a foundation built on self-respect. As you continue exploring this chapter, you begin noticing how disappointment slowly loses its power when you stop letting it rewrite your worth. You start seeing that someone's inconsistency may hurt, but it doesn't define anything about who you are. It simply reveals their capacity, not your value. You realize that staying emotionally strong doesn't mean pretending you don't feel the pain. It means allowing the feeling without letting it control your choices. You feel it, you understand it, and then you rise above it. This is the kind of strength disappointment cannot break. You begin to see how much clarity disappointment actually gives you. It shows you who is truly present. It shows you who values effort. And it shows you who only shows up when it is convenient. This clarity hurts at first, but it saves you from holding on to people who cannot meet you where you stand. You notice that your reactions change when your worth stops depending on someone's performance. You don't chase answers anymore. You don't beg for consistency. You don't try to force a connection. You simply observe what people choose, and their choices tell you everything you need to know. As you reflect deeper, you understand that disappointment is often a redirection. It brings you back to yourself. It reminds you to stop giving energy where it isn't appreciated, and it teaches you to invest in places where your heart is held with respect. You also begin realizing that you cannot control how someone shows up, but you can control how much access you give them. You can lower the intensity without lowering kindness. You can stay polite without staying available. You can care without carrying the weight of their inconsistency. As this understanding settles, you start adjusting your expectations silently. You stop expecting emotional maturity from people who haven't developed it. You stop expecting consistency from those who can't offer it. And you stop expecting depth from those who always choose the surface. This shift protects you from repeated hurt. You learn that emotional strength means knowing when to hold on and when to pull back, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to offer effort and when to let someone's behavior speak for itself. These choices come naturally once your worth is no longer tied to someone else's actions. With time, you begin responding to disappointment with wisdom instead of frustration. You accept what people show you. You adjust your presence. And you stop placing your heart in situations that keep proving they cannot hold it. And as this part closes, one truth becomes clear. Disappointment becomes less painful when your worth becomes stronger. It stops breaking you, it stops confusing you, and it stops controlling how you see yourself. You learn to understand people's limits without lowering your values. And this understanding becomes one of the strongest forms of emotional strength you will ever build. Chapter 9. How to stay grounded when your mind overreacts. As you enter this chapter, you begin noticing how quickly your mind reacts to even small emotional shifts. A slight change in tone, a delay, or an unexpected moment can push your thoughts into fear before you understand anything. And slowly, you realize the struggle isn't the situation. It's the story your mind creates around it. You see how easily your mind jumps ahead of the truth. It fills empty spaces with worry. It connects unrelated moments. It imagines meanings that were never there. And because these thoughts feel intense, your emotions respond before you have any clarity. As you watch yourself, you notice how your body reacts to these imagined conclusions. Your chest tightens, your thoughts speed up, your mood drops, yet nothing outside has actually changed. The reaction comes from assumptions, not facts. This understanding becomes the first step toward grounding yourself. You realize staying grounded doesn't mean stopping your thoughts. It means guiding them back to the present each time they run ahead. You quietly remind yourself, I don't know the full truth yet. And with that, your mind begins to slow down. You start separating what you feel from what you know. You may feel worried, but you don't know if something is wrong. You may feel insecure, but you don't know if anything changed. You may feel afraid, but the facts may be harmless. This separation protects you from reacting to stories instead of reality. As this clarity grows, you practice grounding habits. You pause before responding. You breathe slowly. You give yourself a moment to reset. You remind yourself that interpretation is not truth. Each small step brings your emotions back to balance. You also notice grounding becomes easier when you stop assuming every shift involves you. Not every silence is about you. Not every mood change is connected to you. Not every pause carries meaning. Allowing moments to exist without attaching fear becomes a quiet form of strength. As you practice this, you begin trusting yourself with uncertainty. You don't rush to conclusions. You don't force clarity. You let situations unfold naturally, and you stop letting fear shape stories reality hasn't confirmed. You understand your mind overreacts because it wants to protect you. It tries to warn you before you feel hurt. But sometimes it creates pain that never needed to exist. This understanding softens your inner dialogue, helping you approach your thoughts gently. And as this part ends, one truth becomes clear. A grounded mind isn't without emotion. It simply refuses to be directed by fear. It pauses before believing. It questions before reacting. And with each grounded moment, your emotional world becomes calmer, steadier, and more honest than the stories your mind once created. As you continue this chapter, you begin noticing how much calmer your inner world feels when you stop reacting to the first story your mind creates. You realize most emotional spirals begin with a single assumption, a thought that feels true only because it arrives with intensity. And slowly, you learn that intensity is not truth. You start observing your thoughts the way you observe passing clouds. They move, they shift, they change shape, but none of them define the sky. In the same way, your thoughts may feel heavy, but they do not define reality. This simple awareness begins softening your emotional reactions. You notice grounding becomes easier when you slow down the moment something feels overwhelming. You pause before responding. You remind yourself that your mind is showing a possibility, not a fact. And this pause gives your emotions enough space to settle so the situation becomes clearer. You also start recognizing patterns in your overreactions. You see how your mind jumps toward fear when something feels uncertain. You see how old memories influence new moments. You see how quickly you assume danger simply because the unknown feels uncomfortable. This understanding gives you control you didn't have before. As you reflect deeper, you learn that grounding isn't about denying emotions. It's about guiding them so they don't overpower you. You acknowledge the feeling, but you don't let it define the moment. You let the emotion move through you without letting it decide your reaction. Slowly, your inner strength grows. You remind yourself that you don't need answers instantly. Most situations become clearer with time. Most questions settle when you stop forcing clarity, and most fears fade when you stop feeding them with imagined conclusions. Giving space becomes one of your strongest tools. You begin practicing small grounding habits. You feel your breath. You notice the room around you. You pay attention to physical sensations that bring you back into the present. These simple actions interrupt racing thoughts and stabilize your mind. You learn to talk to yourself in a calmer tone. You say, "I can handle this." You remind yourself, "No need to assume yet." You whisper, "This feeling will pass." These soft statements keep your emotions from turning into worst-case scenarios. As your grounding strengthens, you begin trusting yourself more. You stop fearing uncertainty. You stop needing reassurance. You stop letting temporary moments create permanent reactions. Your stability comes from awareness, not control. And as this part ends, one truth becomes clear. A grounded mind is built through daily choices to pause, to breathe, to wait for clarity before reacting. With each choice, you strengthen the calm within you. And with that calm, fear may whisper, but it no longer decides. Chapter 10: How to Build Unshakable Inner Confidence. As you enter this chapter, you begin realizing that confidence doesn't appear suddenly. It grows quietly through small choices, small moments, and small shifts in how you see yourself. And slowly, you understand that confidence is less about perfection and more about trusting yourself even when things feel uncertain. You notice how often you used to look outside for strength. You wanted approval to feel sure. You waited for reassurance to feel steady. You depended on others to confirm your worth. And each time someone didn't respond the way you hoped, your confidence dropped as if it belonged to them instead of you. As you reflect deeper, you begin seeing that true confidence comes from within, from knowing who you are beyond people's reactions or expectations. It comes from treating yourself with respect, even when someone else doesn't, and it comes from standing in your truth without needing anyone to validate it. You realize inner confidence grows when you stop running from your weaknesses. You face them honestly, you understand them, you improve them slowly, and the moment you stop hiding from your flaws, they lose the power to control you. This honesty becomes a quiet form of strength. You start noticing your relationship with mistakes changing. You no longer see them as proof of failure. You see them as steps toward growth. You adjust, you learn, you move forward, and each mistake becomes a reminder that confidence is built through experience, not through perfection. As you observe yourself, you begin appreciating your own effort. You notice the times you stayed calm when your mind wanted to panic. You value the moments you acted with clarity instead of fear. You recognize the progress you often ignored, and with this recognition, your self-respect deepens. You also realize confidence grows when you stop comparing yourself to others. Their journey is not yours. Their progress doesn't reduce your value. Their strengths don't cancel yours, and once comparison fades, the pressure you used to carry begins to disappear. You start building inner trust through small commitments. You keep promises you make to yourself. You show up on days you feel low. You speak kindly to yourself when things don't go as planned. These habits create a foundation inside you that no one else can break. As this awareness strengthens, your emotional reactions shift. You don't overthink every silence. You don't collapse under criticism. You don't search for validation in every interaction. Confidence creates a calm inside you that is not shaken by temporary moments. And as this part closes, one truth becomes clear. Confidence isn't built by avoiding fear. It grows by trusting your strength more than your doubt. It grows by believing you can handle what comes. And once this foundation becomes steady, people's reactions may shift, situations may change, but your sense of self remains unshakable. As you continue this chapter, you start noticing how confidence grows when you stop letting temporary moments decide how you see yourself. A delayed reply, an off day, or a small misunderstanding no longer shakes your sense of worth. You begin trusting your inner stability more than the reactions happening around you. You realize confidence becomes stronger when you stop seeking approval. You no longer wait for someone's validation to feel sure. You no longer let their reactions measure your value. Your worth starts coming from the strength you are building quietly inside yourself. As you reflect, you see how much confidence depends on the voice you use with yourself. You replace harsh thoughts with calmer ones. You accept your flaws without attacking yourself. You remind yourself that growth needs patience, and these small inner shifts matter more than any outside opinion. You understand confidence doesn't remove doubt. It removes doubt's control. You feel uncertainty but still move forward. You feel fear but still choose clarity. Every step you take, despite discomfort, strengthens something inside you that cannot be easily shaken. You begin to see how confidence expands when you honor your limits. You say no when needed. You stop bending yourself to please others. You stop shrinking to keep peace. And each boundary you set teaches your mind that your voice carries value. As this clarity settles, you start showing up differently. You speak with steadier energy. You don't chase attention. You don't try to prove yourself. You stop fearing the loss of people who were never meant to stay. Confidence frees you from emotional dependence and brings you back to balance. You notice challenges feel different too. You don't jump to worst-case scenarios. You don't break down as quickly. You handle situations with more clarity. And even when things go wrong, you return to yourself instead of falling into self-doubt. You begin trusting your path more deeply. You accept that improvement is slow. You understand that real strength is built in quiet moments, and you stay patient with yourself, knowing that inner stability grows through continuous practice, not sudden transformation. As you look at yourself now, you start seeing the strength that once seemed hidden. You see the resilience that helped you recover from difficult seasons. You see the confidence that formed through every lesson, every setback, and every moment you chose to try again. And as this audiobook comes to an end, one truth becomes clear. Unshakable confidence is not loud or dramatic. It is the calm belief that you can handle life with balance. It is the steady trust that your worth is not defined by anyone else. And when this knowing settles inside you, your emotional world becomes a place of clarity and peace. No matter what changes around you,